Good evening, everybody. Delighted you're here. As usual, this is the second in a series of 6 programs we're doing here at the Alworth Center for the Study of Peace and Justice at Scholastica. This is the second of 6 programs exploring sustainable living. Number 2 of 6. My name is Tom Morgan, by the way, and I'm the director of the center here at Scholastica. These lectures and all these programs are sponsored by the Alworth Center for the Study of Peace and Justice, with special support, of course, from the Alworth family, who are here, and funded in part by the Warner Lecture Series of the Manitou Fund, the DeWitt and Carolyn Van Ivre Foundation, and by Mary C. Van Ivre in memory of William Van Ivre, a former trustee of the college. Additional support has been received from the Global Awareness Fund of the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, Wagner Zahn Architecture, Citizens Climate Lobby, and Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, the Royal D. Alworth Junior Institute at the University of Minnesota Duluth, the UMD Department of World Languages and Cultures, Reader Weekly of Duluth, and from numerous other private sources. I am extremely grateful to all of you for your continued support in these topics and these lectures. And speaking of lectures, upcoming or programs, November 3rd, I just have to tell you about this, is our 3rd annual concert supporting the Sister Cities program in Duluth. One Village, Many Voices. You'll see posters like this out in the flyer. If you want to buy a ticket, see me. I've got some right here in my pocket. And they will feature prominent singers, including Maggie Wheeler, singer-songwriter, community choir director, and Janice of the TV sitcom Friends. On Thursday, November 9th, in this series, we feature a colleague of mine, Bob Hoffman, talking about economic growth and sustainable living. If you're interested in these programs and want to be on our mailing list or get more information in general, we have a sign-up sheet in the lobby. Help yourself, write clearly, and you'll get emails from me from time to time. Other organizations out there in the lobby are also worth a visit. I think we have Citizens Climate Lobby out there, and also Veterans for Peace. They both have information about their organizations, and I invite you to drop by. After the lecture, as we always do, we get together again in neutral ground and talk about what we heard and critique it and analyze it. And you all should have gotten this flyer as you came in. The talkback session this week will be on Thursday here at St. Scholastica. I think you can find your way to 4115 Tower Hall. And it will be conducted or facilitated by Brian Hinderleiter, and his biography and his credentials are on this flyer. He's certainly qualified to talk about nuclear power and to talk about what you're going to hear tonight. After the lecture, we'll have Q&A, as we always do. And as we always do, invite people, students and community people, come forward to these 2 microphones, and our speaker will recognize you in turn. Keep your questions short and succinct, and we can get as many questions in as possible that way. One little note for community people, let the students go first, please. I hope they're dying to ask questions, and we'd like to make sure they get a chance. So let the students go first, and then the community people. On the screen to your left, we're displaying the text, yes we are, of tonight's lecture through technology called real-time captioning. Although we anticipate a high-quality format, there will inevitably be errors that are inherent in the technology. Nevertheless, research indicates that many viewers benefit from captioning, including those without hearing loss. A special thanks to the Edwin H. Eddy Foundation, whose generous support makes this inclusive service possible tonight. One last thing, Speaking of technology, if you have any in your pocket, cell phones or anything, now is a good time to turn them off, please. Our speaker this evening is an American novelist and journalist. She's published 5 novels, and her fiction and nonfiction have appeared in The New Yorker, where she worked as a fiction editor, and in Harper's Magazine, where she was an associate editor. She has contributed articles and editorials on science and other topics to Harper's, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. At a September 2007 seminar given by the Long Now Foundation, Ms. Cravens outlined the message of her book, Power to Save the World, The Truth About Nuclear Energy. By the way, that book, it will be on sale after this lecture, and I think she'll sign one for you if you buy one. Released 10 years ago, the book, and is still in print and continues to be in print. The book argues for nuclear power as a safe energy source and an essential preventative of global warming. Ms. Cravens, who grew up in Albuquerque in the shadow of the atomic bomb, is featured in the 2013 documentary film Pandora's Promise, which spotlights prominent environmentalists who were once fervently opposed to nuclear power, but now support it. Since then, she's given presentations to members of the technical and academic communities around the US, including the Brookings Institution, the Progressive Policy Institute, the University of Hartford, and Sandia National Laboratories. She's often shared the podium with Dr. D. Richard Rip Anderson, a chemist, oceanographer, and expert in nuclear risk assessment. These talks emphasize the need for environmental and technical communities to work together to reduce the anthropogenic causes of catastrophic climate change. Ms. Cravens has contributed articles on nuclear power as a low carbon alternative source to the Huffington Post and to Discovery. In 2002, she wrote Terrorism and Nuclear Energy, Understanding the Risks for the Brookings Review. Gwyneth Cravens lives on Long Island and is married to author Henry Beard. She has a daughter, the artist Astrid Cravens. When she isn't writing or campaigning for nuclear power, she enjoys yoga, travel, and learning about other people. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Gwyneth Cravens.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to hearing your questions or complaints afterward. So we'll begin with Albert Einstein. I love this quote, and I often think of it. I also like Niels Bohr, the scientist, saying the relentless goal of science is the gradual removal of prejudice. And Richard Rhodes, who wrote a fantastic book about nuclear, says, by, quote, prejudice, unquote, Bohr meant belief unsupported by evidence. So just to look at the big picture for a while, 1.6 billion people lack access to electricity. That's here now in 2017, that is the case. And the lifespan of people without electricity is very low. You can see from the, what the statement is making here. 43-year lifespan in those regions. Regions with some power, 50-year lifespan. Fully electrified, well, here we are. 70 to 85-year lifespan. So it's important to really begin to think about nuclear power as a source of electricity. It means clean air and clean water, better healthcare thanks to refrigeration of medicines, vaccines, and so on, better lives for families, and better education opportunities, and stronger economies. These are all lacking in many places, including the United States. There are places where people do not have enough electricity and so on. I mean, we do better than other countries, but there are still places that aren't so good. So what do we do about electricity? Here are the world energy divisions about where energy comes from. And you can see from them that coal is a huge contributor, probably the biggest contributor on the face of the earth, 39%. And nuclear provides 17%, gas 20%, and the remaining things are small in terms of energy distribution. In countries that rely mostly on coal and oil and gas, the air is the worst. China, for example, is 75% coal, burning coal, 3% nuclear. In the United States and the European Union, nuclear for the United States is 20%, and in the European Union is 30% nuclear. France keeps building nuclear plants, clean nuclear. There's no smoke, there's no bad air, there's no carbon dioxide coming from them. And the French now have 80% of their electricity coming from nuclear plants, and they have clean skies. If you've ever happened to visit France, let's say 20, 30 years ago, and you could barely see down a street because of all the murk from coal and so on, that's gone. Paris is a very shiny place now, clear air. And so we have to talk about anthropogenic, meaning human-caused carbon dioxide emissions. In 2013, was probably still the world record, 36 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions produced by humans. And that has caused a rise in temperature here. That is the danger that we, as humans on the planet, because these emissions don't just stay local, they get carried around the world. 2016 is so far the warmest year on record. We'll find out at the end of 2017, whether that's grown. And 8 of the 12 months of last year were the warmest on record. What we're seeing now, regularly now, the melting of ice caps. We all know, I'm sure everyone here has heard one way or another about how the North Pole is that area, the northern part of the globe is melting. And meanwhile, more water is therefore flowing into the oceans, and the sea level is rising. In the past 2 decades, it's been 16 inches extra. So we have the melting of the ice caps, glaciers, permafrost, flooding, coastal and ocean, ecosystems dying, and acidification, which is very bad for our health. This is a picture taken in Beijing about air pollution from burning fossil fuels. They're the worst. And you can see in this this picture is from just last year. That's a normal day in Beijing. That's what it's like. And that stuff is not just fog, that's particles from fossil fuel production. In contrast, nuclear energy is just cleaner and safer. And I'll just say parenthetically here right now, when for many years I was anti-nuclear. I opposed it. I marched against the building of a nuclear plant in Long Island and so on. That was when I didn't know the real facts. Gradually, I became taught by Dr. Rip Anderson, a scientist in New Mexico at the Sandia National Laboratories. And he very gently, I made a few comments about how bad nuclear power was to someone from Sandia Labs, where they build things that make nuclear energy. And he just very gently began to tell me a little bit at a time, not saying too much, about the things I'm now going to copy that I learned from Rip. America's 99 nuclear power reactors that is for the public provide 62.4% of our clean air electricity. There are 61 commercial operating nuclear power plants with 99 nuclear reactors in the US, in 30 of the United States, 30 states, that is. Other clean sources for generation of power include hydroelectric, wind farms, geothermal, and solar. But of those, hydropower is the biggest clean source that isn't connected with nuclear. Wind and solar remain low, and geothermal also. They're not likely to grow much. Here's another explanation, or something that began to change my mind when I was shown this particular diagram. The number of deaths per terawatt hour from living with fossil fuel versus living with nuclear electricity. And you can see the number of deaths per terawatt hour on this particular picture, with coal being the worst, highest number of deaths per terawatt hour from, and this is from crap being thrown out by the coal-fired plants. Oil being the next highest in deaths per terawatt hour for burning oil for electricity. And then you move on down, and the lowest one is nuclear power, which in the United States is extremely low. Worldwide, nuclear energy has the smallest carbon footprint, the smallest environmental footprint. And you can see this picture of greenhouse gas emission by electricity production. And again, lignite, which is even worse than plain coal, being, dirtier. And then at the very bottom, you see the very little tiny thing, a little footprint is nuclear power. Again, it's cleaner and safer. One of the things that when I first began to look into all this, I already believed that a nuclear power plant could explode anatomically because of movies I'd seen, that sort of thing, or book, science fiction books and so on. No nuclear plant can explode atomically. The North American-made reactors are just about all of them located 30 meters underground. That's pretty far down. Anchored in bedrock, which means things don't shake. Always enclosed by multiple layers of containment. And these generating stations have, compared to other forms like coal and oil and so on, have all of the energy in an extremely small footprint. Now, one of the things I did when I began looking into this, and with Rip Anderson and his wife Marcia, we would travel around and we went to different nuclear plants around the country. And one of the things we saw that was quite amazing was what a containment wall in a nuclear plant looks like. 4 feet of thick concrete stops all radiation. So the atomic processes in a nuclear plant are completely closed off from escape. Shielding, again, stops all rays and particles, and this is a good picture of how that works from alpha, beta, gamma, and neutrons. And the neutrons get as far as the concrete, the others less so. My favorite equation here is 1 banana equals more radiation exposure than you'd get from a nuclear plant. 1 banana actually has more millirem of radioactive particles in it naturally, quite naturally, than a nuclear power station. Now, it's important to think about the volume of waste that goes along with getting whatever kind of energy you want to get. And for coal, one person using only one power source for 77 years, getting coal gets, that one person's share would be 69 tons of ash and 77 tons of carbon dioxide, which is not good for you. Nuclear power. The nuclear plant makes, what they have are these fuel pellets. And when they're used up, the so-called ash, it's not ash, but it's what's left over from used fuel pellets that have exhausted themselves, don't even fill one Coke can for, let's say, one person for 77, getting a power source for 77 years. All the fuel pellets don't even fill one Coke can, and there's almost no gaseous waste connected with that. But in fact, in reality, the used fuel pellets, unlike the case with coal ash and CO2 waste, the used fuel pellets never leave the plant. They are put into deep, thick-walled places, and they're not just shoved out, thrown away in the garbage can or anything. There's almost no gaseous waste also. So you can see these 6 railroad cars, each holding 12 tons of coal waste. That's one person's share for a lifetime. Nuclear power, a tiny bit in a Coke can. Again, the nuclear fuel pellet, which you will never in life see personally. They're not walking around. You can't get them at the drugstore or anything. A typical fuel pellet of uranium weighs about 7 grams or 0.24 ounces, and it can generate as much energy as 3.5 barrels of oil or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas or 1,780 pounds of coal. When I learned this, when I talked to people about this, and they cleared up my head about it, I was amazed at just how big and unhelpful to the planet and to our personal health natural gas and coal are. So what I want to say is to always look at the whole picture. And that's something that Rip Anderson always would say to me. Let's always look at the whole. The big picture is that we must act now. We must take the journey from myth to fact. Let's remove prejudice by using science-based information. Often people can't do that. And I admit that when I began thinking about these things, I realized that my prejudices were more not science-based. Facing the greatest challenge together, which is, let's cooperate and be good stewards of the planet and of our energy future. Thank you.
Now, the questions. There's got to be lots of questions, or you have issues that you would like our speaker to cover. So I invite you to come down and do that now. Or have you, yes, here we have one.
Hi, what's the average cost for constructing a nuclear power plant?
The average cost?
Yeah.
It's expensive. I'm sorry, I stepped away from the microphone. It's tens of millions of dollars, actually. I think that it didn't used to be that much, but the more they understood about how to encase the waste and this and that, it comes to, it's expensive. But in the long run, it is actually cheaper than coal and gas in the end, because of how much they enclose the ash, the leftover matter from the nuclear plant. You compare that, and when I was working on the book, I went to coal plants in Virginia and stuff, and you see these big mountains of coal dust, coal plant, you know, it's terrible. And it blows around, and it's, you know, people have, their faces are blackened, and it's not healthy at all. You don't have you don't see anything like that. You've got the little pellets, which you can't pick up, of course, but they're about this big if you are dealing with nuclear plants. Of course, no one picks up these. I'm just showing you. They're you know, packed in and buried and all of that sort of thing, so they don't get out. So is that
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Hi, Gwyneth.
Hi.
I want to begin by telling the audience that I'm a fellow author and that I highly recommend your book. It was one of the first three I bought. You write eloquently. It is hugely readable, and it's marvelous information. You people should buy this book.
I paid him to say this.
I do have a bit of your problem. I have a bit of a problem with you listing wind and solar as clean because of their capacity factor.
I agree. I agree with that.
Okay. You want to explain that?
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, okay, wind and solar were sold to us on the basis of what they could deliver. Their plate rating on top of the facility is called their plate rating, pardon me, what they could do under the best conditions. Best conditions are not possible. So they are rated on a capacity factor. Capacity factor for both of those is about 30%, which basically means to deliver what their plate rating says, they are relying on baseline power generators elsewhere that primarily burn carbon. And so, yes, they do create some clean energy, but they are carbon reliant, and we need to remember that, whereas nuclear, which is being displaced by wind and solar, is essentially carbon-free and has a efficiency of 90-some%. And by the way, the new plants are much cheaper. Yes. Modular molten salt reactors now cost far less than the conventional reactors that we have been accustomed to. Thank you. I hope you sell a lot of books.
Well, thank you, and thank you for spreading the word. Yes. Cool.
I'm a little too tall for this, but I'll try. I just wanted to thank you so much for coming to Minnesota. I've read your book, and I'm a good friend of Michael Schellenberger's in Environmental Progress. We live in a state that's very environmentally conscious. We have clean air and clean water. And this is a mecca where conversations like this really should be had. So I just wanted to thank you for being here. One thing that I learned through a lot of sort of climate searching is that there's a big difference between light water reactors that use uranium and advanced nuclear reactors. So in your slides, you know, for those of the audience members that don't understand that differentiation, could you just make that maybe a little more clear for us newcomers? Thank you.
I don't know if I can. That's it's above my pay grade. The advanced reactors are still in progress, and they have to go through a whole lot of steps to get certified and so on. So the reactors we're now using around the country, the 99, are not advanced. And I hope the people working on these can go forward, but they have to study and replace things and start all over sometimes. But generally, there is hope for the future. I don't know if that helps.
I noticed you didn't talk about the elephant in the room. What do you do with the nuclear waste? I wonder if the scientists are...
Okay.
I know the scientists are trying to find some way to recycle the waste so that it can be used to produce additional electrical energy, but I wonder if you have any insight as to how to solve that problem.
Well, first of all, the famous nuclear waste that we're talking about, all of it that is accumulated since we started having nuclear plants could fit in about half of one football field. A few feet thick, a few feet deep. It's not like coal. If you've ever been to a out to coal country, and you see the big piles of burnt coal ash, you get a different idea about it. So one of the real important things about nuclear plants and nuclear waste is the amount of it is very small. That I talked about earlier with showing the slides. If you burned nuclear, if you used nuclear for 77 years, your share of the waste wouldn't even fill one Coke can. That's in 77 years. So, yeah, people do talk about the waste and as if this is really a scary thing. First of all, it's always enclosed. It's carefully monitored. A lot of it is put deep down, and I don't consider it a problem myself. I mean, there might be people who do, but the idea is to keep it that way, to keep, and they've come up with better ways of enclosing the waste and so on. And the other thing about nuclear waste is it begins to fall apart. You know, anything nuclear doesn't last, and it's not like concrete. It keeps giving up its energy. And pretty soon, it's not going to be anything. Not in our lifetimes, but in the future, you know, they might be able to open a canister of nuclear waste, and it's nothing. You know, you can put it in the cat's litter box or something. You know, it's not going to, kill anybody.
Comment about what you're talking about. My name is Liz Trayer, and I ran the high-level nuclear waste program. I ran the high-level nuclear waste program at Los Alamos in the 70s and 80s, and I can guarantee this is a political issue. It's not a chemical issue. It's not a science issue at all.
Bravo. That is so true. A lot of these things are political, and they have been used by people in, let's say, the coal and oil industry to make sure you just keep away from nuclear and keep burning coal and oil. Thank you for that.
Hi, this might tie in with an earlier question, but what is currently being done with spent fuel rods from nuclear reactors?
They are stored. Again, if you want to put them in that imaginary football field, that's where they would wind up. And there's just not, it's such a little amount as compared to all the other things, including windmills with their heavy concrete bases that go 40 feet down into the ground and so on, or the solar panels that people have died from solar panels and from accidents produced by the windmills. You know, people died as a result of windmill trouble. That has not happened with nuclear.
I was wondering, how much longer are uranium reserves expected to last?
Oh, forever. I don't have, I mean, there's so much uranium. I mean, just in, let's say, my home state, New Mexico, there's enough uranium to keep building plants for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not going to burn out for a long time.
Okay, thanks.
My question is, from like start of construction of the plant to like how long does it take to get like actual energy to the people?
That is a slow-mo question. The nuclear plants take a long time to be built. And I think some of that is personal, just because I'm not in the business, you know, so I'm a writer. I think some of it is just keeping people, they have jobs for all, 10, 20 years doing, and there's no rush. You go to France, they want a new reactor, they want a new nuclear plant. It's up really fast. So I think there's something about the way Americans do their business. In other words, it's a business thing. Because in other places they can put together a plant really quickly, relatively speaking.
Thank you for your talk, very interesting. My name's Stephanie Hemphill. I'm a writer too. I'm a retired reporter with Minnesota Public Radio.
Oh.
My beat was the environment, and I reported on nuclear issues. I visited the Prairie Island nuclear plant, which is not deep underground. It's on a floodplain of the Mississippi River, surface ground. I became aware of small missteps in nuclear power plants like the Prairie Island plant. Small leaks, small missing equipment, small examples of misprotected equipment when they shipped low-level nuclear waste. And I became aware of how the Nuclear Regulatory Commission deals with such issues. And I think it's important for you to explain to me, how I should not be worried about a possible Fukushima or Chernobyl happening in Minnesota or anywhere in the United States, given this kind of history.
Well, that's a tough question. I think that for one thing, the amount of waste is small. And yes, there have been incidents, but no one has died in the United States from...
People died of Chernobyl.
Chernobyl was a completely different story. The whole... someone from Russia who was bossing around the people at Chernobyl said to turn off certain things in the plant. This led to a disaster. This was some guy who came from Russia who didn't even know anything about nuclear plants and just started marching around and telling people what to do. It was not based on anything of intelligence. Fukushima, the story is the tidal wave. And they found writing on a wall in a canyon back of where Fukushima is, a few miles back, that talked about how, like 300, 400 years ago, the a tsunami had come and had gone way up that canyon. It was so huge coming out of the ocean. So that's a plant that should not have been put there in the first place. If people, I mean, one of the things they try to do in the US, especially more recently, I can't speak about the prairie one, but you try to locate all of the mechanical stuff of the place in a very safe, clear place that is not going to be, you know, where there's going to be huge floods and things like that. So, there are some of these older plants, you know, they were built earlier when less was known about these things. So we've got that going on. But I think plants in general have tried to keep fixing themselves up, to keep protecting, doing better protection. Does it always work? So far, it's been pretty good, but we have to watch very much for that.
Thank you. Hi, so I was wondering about how many people it takes to run these plants and how many jobs are generated through building these nuclear plants.
Jobs at nuclear
Generated.
plants? Does any, maybe someone here who knows might be able to say, do you, George?
How many people it takes to run these plants and how many jobs are generated through these nuclear plants?
I would say it takes a few hundred people to run a nuclear plant, from top to bottom, from all the steps and so on. But I wouldn't be able to give you a zippy answer to that one.
Okay, so a lot of the stuff you've talked about today seems pretty good. It seems pretty logical to go with what you're saying. And like I've heard other controversial topics that other people have brought up now. So what are the negative effects of having nuclear power, and what are the risks?
What are the negative effects of nuclear power?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of positive effects, and I'm wondering if there's any negative effects.
Well, compared to other forms of, power forms, nuclear has the best. If you look on the slides I showed, they are the tiniest number of deaths, the tiniest, compared to coal and oil and gas, for example. So that's just, there are more deaths from those working in those plants than in a nuclear plant. And in the United States, no one has died as a result of a nuclear plant that's a commercial nuclear plant. There were some deaths from among a few from people, scientists working on other things, weapons and so on, in America, that they got exposed to stuff they shouldn't have. You know, it was in the very early days of that. But nuclear power is safer and cleaner than all the rest, as I keep repeating. I don't know if that helps.
Just to follow up, what do you think is preventing us from changing to nuclear power then?
You know, I wish I knew. As I said earlier, France is 80% nuclear power now. They're doing fine. Their skies have cleared. I remember going to France years ago, and you could barely see your way through Paris because it was foggy, smog, terrible smog. now France is very clean, the air is clean. They've got these great plants. It's been a very good thing for the French. So they're showing that, and they've had no deaths from the operation of the nuclear machinery in the plant, you know, none of that. So just generally, and you can see it on the tables I put on the screen, it's the lowest of all the forms of providing electricity.
You've chosen your statistics very, very well, I think, and to support your argument. But I'd like to question one of them, at least one of them, and that is you suggest that one person in 77 years using nuclear energy would produce only a slightly less full Coke can of residue. That's one person. So if you have millions of people doing this, you're going to have millions of Coke cans full of this nuclear waste. And that's something that I think we need to pay attention to. When you say that this football field full of nuclear waste is small, but I think we need to recognize that that nuclear waste is toxic. It has a radioactive life of half a radioactive life of thousands and thousands of years. We still do not have a national repository for this nuclear waste because we can't find a place that's safe to do it. So I think we need to address those issues very carefully. I'd like your response to that.
I agree with what you're saying because, you know, the Coke can thing, they were building a place in Nevada that was going to be a nuclear waste depository, you know, inside of a mountain. And I went there, it was quite interesting. And there was various confusion about that and negativity about, oh, no, we can't do that. So what's happening now is the nuclear waste is being held at the nuclear plants around the country, but very carefully and it's very much watched and, you know, put deeply in silos or, you know, below ground and so on. And I think that the people running the plants are very aware of making sure it remains. Again, you have I showed the picture of concrete, you know, the different things that the rays go through, and then they get to this thick concrete slab. Well, that concrete slab is basically what is going on in nuclear plants. The stuff is enclosed. And I think the nuclear plants would like to get it out of their particular plant place, and that there could be in Nevada or somewhere a real deep place where that all could be put. But right now it's happening at each of the plants.
Thank you for your information today. It's very valuable. I'm wondering about the impacts in the environment of mining uranium. And I understand it's a very destructive mining operation. There's a lot of waste rock for the little bit of uranium they get, and I imagine some of that floods the streams and creates problems, not only in this country, but other countries where they mine uranium. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, yes, because I grew up in uranium land, New Mexico. And I used to play in the arroyo with sand and stuff. Well, if you bring a Geiger counter to any of the dirt in New Mexico, it's higher than in other places. First of all, it's higher up, you know, it's high mountain areas, high mesas and stuff. So you have that going on. But these that is natural in those places. And it turns out that it's seeming that people who live in those places where there's more uranium in the soil are healthier. I'm not telling you to go out and get some uranium and eat it or whatever, please don't. But I grew up in a land where you could walk around with a Geiger counter in your backyard, and hear that. It's still very low compared to refined uranium, which is, you don't want to be playing with that. That's very seriously handled and very carefully handled, at least in our country.
My question is, where do we have room to put all these nuclear plants and nuclear waste fields without endangering the public or nearby wildlife?
Well, this is going in our country. This is going on right now, because what each nuclear plant is having to do is to dig. Let's say they are in soil where they can dig down deeply and put it in thick-walled containers. You saw the picture that I put on the screen of, this 4-foot wide wall. That is what protects, and that's what they're doing now. And when you have a wall that fat, the neutron, the stuff, the radioactivity stuff cannot get through it. It just stops. So I don't know if that helps you.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just thinking, I clean and I pick up stuff, and when it grosses me out a little bit, I can put it in a thin bag, and when it grosses me out a little bit more, I contain it even more, and then when I don't even want to look at it, I put it in the garbage where I can't see it. I just want to know if we have to encase a Coke can in 4 feet of cement, lead, and I can't remember the other layer, aluminum, to catch the other element.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if that Coke can's not in 4 feet? Like, it kind of freaks me out that the waste itself demands 4 feet of protection. So if that Coke can with our waste is not in 4 feet of protection, what can that waste do?
Well, that's why, the reason I chose a Coke can, some scientist was telling me that's about how much in a lifetime you're going to wind up with
right.
But it doesn't mean in reality
I don't
that
expect
we're going to have
they're putting it in a Coke can, but that quantity of waste, how toxic is it?
It's toxic enough that it has to be put in a place with walls 4 feet thick.
What if it's
and
not
underground.
in those walls? What would happen if it was not?
That's why they put it in a place where they have these very thick walls. They don't just put it out in the backyard,
Right.
Or kind of just throw it over the balcony if you live in New York or something. Right. No, it is watched like crazy.
I think it's just a testament to how dangerous the chemical or the matter is that's left. And I guess that's what kind of worries me.
Well,
because I think it's significant that it needs to be contained at the level
that's
that
it. And it is.
Yeah.
In this country, it is.
Is it in other countries?
It depends. You don't know, what are they doing in Russia? What are they doing in Ukraine? We don't, what are they doing in China?
Right.
I think that they're smart enough in those places to not, have to be exposed to that. And that it is from day one, forever, enclosed and put deep, usually deep deep down in the ground is a useful place.
Right.
And so, some places they have, I've seen, I think it was in Nevada that I was looking, they have these thick concrete walls down below, and stuff can be put in within those thick walls like this, and nobody, the particles, are not going to get out of there. The radiation is not going to get out of there. It's enclosed. So that's how it is done. If in places where they're wise about it, there are other places in the world where you just have to hope they're making the same kind of connections and doing things.
Thanks.
Hi, I have questions about the long-term effects of radiation.
The long-term?
Long-term, and that it's kind of like carbon monoxide. You can't see it, you can't smell it. Unlike black lung disease or things, especially from coal, that you can see the direct correlation. So I've worked in research labs with radio-labeled substances and am aware of long-term health effects on the human body and human cells. That I don't think the verdict's been out that long to say it's such a safe form of energy when, for instance, the United States, I think you said 20% of our power comes from nuclear energy. So I think it just hasn't been out long enough to make that statement, and also thinking of the long-term effects on living organisms, humans and other species. And also, in one slide you had clean air, clean water, and I think maybe cleaner air, cleaner water would be better, because I know there's thermal effects at
true,
nuclear power plants,
Yeah.
and that affects the aquatic environment too, and can add to there's
Yes.
thermal pollution
Yes.
also, and it's another thing, you can't smell it really and see it, but that you can measure. So just those type of things about just the verdict, I don't think is out for that to say that it's such a safe form versus solar and other clean energy sources. So.
Well, I can just say that having grown up in New Mexico, where there's a lot of uranium in the soil, you still have to take that uranium and process it to make it strong enough and heavy duty enough to run, to create, power for your nuclear plant. The soil that we, in New Mexico that you see all the time and live with is at a low level, even though it's uranium, and it's higher than maybe things are in Connecticut or whatever. But it's the plants do take very good care of the waste, and they. I would be actually more concerned about radiologists and in hospitals and so on. There's a lot of that kind of thing going on, and how can I would hope that they are also very careful with the radioactive material that's used in medicine. I don't know if that helps any, but that's a thought.
Hello. I think we should move towards nuclear because I think it's a better option than coal. But it may take decades to approach that 8% that the French have in terms of nuclear energy. So what should we do in the interim?
Pray. It's just for reasons I don't understand. They have shut down or are going to shut down a few perfectly functioning nuclear plants in the United States because there's a lot of gas. They found all this gas. It's free or very cheap now. This discovery of natural gas, and I think that that has sort of messed up the minds of some of these people who own nuclear plants and gas plants and coal plants, and they don't think ahead enough. So that's my little opinion. Someone else might have a different take on it.
Thank you for coming to speak this evening. I'm enjoying your discussion. I think you've presented the best case for nuclear in the sense that it presents a very low carbon footprint, right, in a world with climate, where we all have to be concerned about climate change. But you wrote the book in 2008, is that correct? So since that time, we have had a pretty big change in the energy market in the world and in the United States, particularly in wind and solar, which you've mentioned. And that continues to grow and grow and grow. We have our neighbor down south, Iowa, is 36% wind. We, the year before you wrote your book, we had the Next Generation Energy Act in Minnesota that was stipulating 25% renewables by 2025. We're already there on most measures. So I'm wondering if you were to write an addendum to the book, what would you write about in terms of what's nuclear's place in this new context?
Well, I think there's still room for both to do wind and solar. Why not? At this point, at least my understanding is you can't count on wind and solar 24/7. It goes up and down. And so you have to have something that works around the clock, 24/7, like nuclear does, that's always there. No matter, whether it's your day off or what, whatever, it's still going to keep doing its job. So wind and solar have their place, fine. I don't see them taking over the country. And just personally, since I grew up in the mesas, when I fly over Arizona, parts of Arizona and so on, and California, and you see huge amounts of windmills, and every one of them is on a concrete base, 40 feet deep. Well, I used to go into those mesas there that were, had deer and, grass and cactus and so on. And now they're turned into these horrible places. So from that point of view, yes, the sun and all of that is good, and but if it's carried on too much and messed up the landscape too much, I think, you've got to think about that. The nice thing about a nuclear plant is its footprint is very small compared to a coal plant or oil, and certainly wind and solar.
I wonder if you could speak to something I read where it talks about these two scientists from MIT who have found a way to recycle as much as 98% of the remaining waste by nuclear power plants, and the lifetime of waste could be dropped by hundreds of thousands of years to just a few hundred years, how that's progressing, whether or not they can do that. And then the new technology, there's the small nuclear power plants that they build that were city size, 50 to 300 megawatts, or the size in aircraft carriers.
Those are two things that I'm very interested in and that I've heard about in recent years. And I think that we have to keep pushing those things. I have read that there are better ways to collect the finished stuff that can't be, pardon?
Old waste?
Old waste, the old waste. And make it more compact and so on. And I also like the idea of small reactors. And I have talked to different friends who were in that, thinking about things like that. If you, let's say you have a city the size of this one, you don't need a big, huge, giant nuclear plant. You could maybe have a couple of little ones, local. So there, I know people are looking into that, and some of these new, like New Scale and so on, they seem to be going, that's a group that's working on this. We'll see what they can bring up, because it doesn't have to be a huge plant every time. I don't know if that helps any of your thinking there. Thank you.
I'd like to challenge some of the things you've said here tonight, but of course I only get one question, so I can't go into about 3 dozen that I'd like to. But I'd just like to start by saying I've worked in a lot of different places in my life, many of them industrial plants, and you seem to have a great deal of faith in the business community as being very concerned about safety and people's health and so forth and so forth and so forth. And I've got a 45, 50-year history of working in the real world that says that's not very true. They're out there to make money. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but that's the way capitalism is. You're there to make money. And so you have these nuclear power plants that are now getting to be 40, 50, some of them now I think are 60 years old, is that correct? Which are obviously getting beyond their engineering life expectancy. And you have an attitude in which making money is the primary thing that those commercial operations are trying to do. And then you have things which you seem to be downplaying about the accidents that have occurred. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and most recently Fukushima. Fukushima is a classic case of what happens when everything goes wrong. Like you said, they put it in the wrong place. Well, how many other of those 99 plants are in the wrong place? I don't know. Do you know?
The ones
I would just like to say that I think the nuclear power industry has had a fairly good record of not having accidents, or at least not accidents that were big enough to make the news. But how long are we going to be lucky in this situation before we have a Fukushima here? And people are dying because of Fukushima.
Well, first I can assure you that there are no plants allowed to be built in the United States in the place that Fukushima was built. That was a reckless thing.
The plant in California that's sitting on top of the earthquake fault, the one that's 25 miles from New York City, that's in the, I believe it's in the Hudson River Valley, is it not?
Yeah.
Am I incorrect in that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so far nothing devastating has happened. You don't know. I mean, it's true about anything. Every morning we get up out of bed and we think, hey, another day, everything's going fine. And then you stumble or whatever. But I can just tell you from talking to a lot of scientists and going to a lot of nuclear plants, they are really concerned about keeping the place safe because they have to work there. And they do not want any Fukushima kind of thing going on there. So that's what I can tell you.
Gwyneth, thank you. I feel I should tell the audience, I belong to the Thorium Energy Alliance. I am in daily contact with engineers and physicists, and I am neither. I am, you might say, they're journalists. I probably have 20 emails a day on radiation safety issues and nuclear power issues, and so I'm up to date. I would like to add some information to the questions given, particularly about waste. Those pellets, those uranium pellets that fuel the reactors are about the diameter of this pen, roughly, a little bigger. That pellet is 95% uranium-238. That's kind of like what you get out of the ground. It doesn't do anything. The remaining 4 to 5% is U-235. That's the potent stuff that really has the energy. When that U-235 fissions, it creates breakdown products that we call actinides in the remaining 238. So a little bit of the top of this pen is what does the job. It then contaminates the remaining 238 with these actinides that make that fuel inefficient. So periodically, like roughly every 3 years, those pellets, those rods with those pellets are removed. They're called waste, but they are fuel. France recycles that waste.
Yes.
They take those actinides out and they reuse those again and again. And in so doing, they reduce their waste substantially. To the point where it really is barely significant. I want to tell you also, somebody mentioned cancer. Nuclear power plant workers have a lower cancer incidence of any workers. They're lower than the other industrial workers. Yes. People who work in nuclear shipyards where they're installing nuclear reactors on our submarines and our aircraft carriers have lower cancer incidence than people in the general population. People who worry about radiation need to recall that people in Denver are getting far more radiation than we are here, and airline pilots are getting constantly much higher radiation, and they show no greater incidence of cancer. That doesn't mean that there aren't levels that we should be concerned about, but we are overly fearful of radiation. Finally, regarding Fukushima and Chernobyl, Gwyneth showed a slide of this thick concrete wall. That's a section of that dome, that containment dome that you see on every nuclear facility. That dome is there. Most people think it's going to contain a nuclear explosion. It's not. It's there because we inherited water-cooled reactors from Admiral Rickover, because he cooled his submarines with water-cooled reactors, and we went with that. Water has to be kept under high pressure. If a leak develops, that's going to expand 1,000 times. So that is necessary to contain that. It also is necessary to contain any hydrogen that is produced when the rods react with water, because hydrogen is explosive. The explosion at Chernobyl was a hydrogen explosion. At Fukushima, it was a hydrogen explosion. And the molten salt reactor I mentioned earlier, that can consume our waste as fuel. There are solutions, but we've been using these reactors that are basically updated 40-year-old designs, when we should be using reactors that we know are better all the way around. That's not a dream. We had one of those running for 22,000 hours in the 60s. And it was a reactor that can't melt down and can burn the waste. And we canceled it with a political decision. I'm sorry Gwyneth, I'm so on your side. Thanks.
Well, thank you. George, I'm grateful for all that you said because I agree with everything you said. It's important